Hi, everyone. My name is Ekram Sardar, and I'm the curator at Squeaky Wheel. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm a Turkish male with a beard and short brown hair, and behind me is a bookshelf in a bluish room. I'll be briefly talking about this evening, giving you some directions and technical notes to guide you, and introduce Jordan Lord, Emily Wattlington, as well as our surprise guests. To those of you who don't know us, Squeaky Wheel is a center for art and technology that provides low-cost equipment rentals, media education for youth and adults, and exhibitions, screenings, public programs such as this one as well. Prior to this film, you may have seen a recognition of territory, that the land from which you are receiving this stream from is Seneca land protected by the Treaty of Canandaigua. Part of reading this recognition of treaty, part of reading this recognition of territory for any of you attending wherever you may be is not only building real awareness of the very real treaties that are supposed to govern the land that we are on, but also frame how we live and work on colonized land. This is the third of 5 single night events as part of Timelines of Care, a series focusing on care work, illness, and disability from a lens that emphasizes time and duration, whether it be through the minutiae of the day-to-day or conversations crisscrossing through and across decades and generations. Among other things, these events are also a direct indictment of the way this colonial and capitalist state has and continues to fail us, as this week has shown us and continues to show us once again. This acknowledgement, however, is also essential in imagining the different futures for how this land and our lives upon it can also be stewarded. The next event in this series is What Would an Uprising Doula Do?, which is an interactive workshop presented by the What Would an HIV Doula Do community, and that'll be taking place on Friday, November 20th, and I do hope you join us then as well. I'll be linking to that in the Google Doc, and registration for that event is limited. Next Friday also, we have an event with our new exhibition. Yes, we have an exhibition opening in our window gallery, so you can safely stay outside. And with that, a live cooking show screening by members of Public Visualization Studio as part of their exhibition, Passing Through the Heart. We just watched Jordan Lord's amazing film, Shared Resources, and I couldn't be more excited today to have the filmmaker Jordan Lord with us and in conversation with Emily Wattlington, as well as Jordan's parents, Albert Lord and Deborah Lord. As I've been saying to many of the people around me, this is, as you may have seen, a witty, very funny, deeply moving, and absolutely precise and beautiful film. And, I think through this week, it's been really wonderful sort of being grounded with it. I'm grateful for Emily for suggesting that we screen Jordan's work as part of this series, and thank you, Jordan, also for being a part. While you watch this, you can click on the Google Doc, which you can see a link beneath this video, and you can leave responses and questions as part of the event. Choose yourself a font, a color, leave comments, and please be cool, please abide by our community guidelines. And as always, we ask that people be mindful of coming from different lived experiences. If you're having any technical trouble, do feel free to send us a text message at the number below. And as I always say, it's nice to have you all here and near. And if you feel like taking a screenshot of your screen and telling us how you may be enjoying this event, do tag us at Squeaky Buffalo on Twitter or Instagram. We love seeing you, and it's nice to know that we are not in the voids of our individual rooms and screens. I also want to thank Dex Access Services who have organized ASL interpretation this evening. Thank you, Jum, for joining us. And also Rochelle Hopkins, who is providing live captioning. Thank you, Rochelle. This event is presented with support by the County of Erie and County Executive Mark Poloncarz, the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew M. Cuomo, and the New York State Legislature, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, and individual members, businesses, and supporters like you. Now I will introduce Jordan Lord and Emily Wattlington. Jordan Lord is a filmmaker, writer, and artist working primarily in video, text, and performance. Their work addresses the relationships between historical and emotional depths, framing and support, access, and documentary. Their work has been shown internationally at festivals and venues, including Doc NYC, Artist Space, Anthology Film Archives, and Camden Art Center. Their solo exhibition of video work, After, was presented by Piper Cleese at Raven Row in London, UK, and their work was screened as part of the Festival on Art and Disability, I Want to Be With You Everywhere at Performance Space New York. Emily Wattlington is assistant editor at Art in America. She writes about contemporary art, primarily video, often through the lenses of feminism and disability justice. A Fulbright scholar with a master's degree from MIT in the history, theory, and criticism of architecture and art, she has held curatorial positions at the MIT List Visual Arts Center and Mass Arts Bacalar and Payne Galleries, now the Mass Art Museum. Her writing has appeared in publications such as Artforum, Moose, and Frieze, and she has contributed to numerous books and exhibition catalogs, including Before Projection, Video Sculpture from 1974 to 1995, An Inventory of Shimmers, Objects of Intimacy in Contemporary Art, which was published in 2017, and Independent Female Filmmakers, which was published by Routledge in 2018. Please welcome Jordan, Emily, Deborah, and Albert.
Thank you, Ekram, for that lovely introduction. Also to Ekram and Mark and everyone at Squeaky for having us. I want to thank Joan, our interpreter, and Rochelle, our captioner, and of course, Jordan for sharing your wonderful film, and Deborah and Albert for sharing your story and joining us for this conversation. I'm going to get to visual descriptions of, who you're seeing on screen in a minute, but I have a short preamble before I do. Yeah, I was first drawn to Jordan's work after seeing their film After Access, and to ideas around disability and debt, class, and health, and also access in filmmaking. But yeah, I just really loved watching shared resources because I just identified with so much about, yeah, also I grew up as like a Southern white person of a similar class and, a Southern millennial who left. There's so much in common. For instance, I also call my grandmother Mimi, and Deborah, I'm also an ice chewer. And I was thinking about, there's like a line from, I believe, Ashley, your sister, Jordan, who is talking about like mostly eating like canned and frozen produce or vegetables, which is also like what I grew up on. And I just wanted to share a funny story that I shared with Jordan, and you said you had a similar experience, which was like being a freshman in college and seeing someone eat like a big bell pepper for the first time and thinking like, it must be so spicy. And then, learning a little bit more about fresh produce. So anyway, the film is really rich, both in terms of narrative, but also in the way that Jordan mentions of documentary filmmaking. So one, as a way of incorporating access into the film, and then two, in the way, Jordan, you're grappling with the subjectivity of others, particularly other family members in this film, including, by letting them respond to the footage and describe themselves. And so in doing that, you're like refusing to subsume them into your own narrative or to tell only your side of the story or put forward only your ideas about disability and debt, which is easy for filmmakers to do, but to have multiple sides of this conversation on the table. And at one point, Albert, you even say that you don't like a certain way that you're represented and you want to tell the other side of the story. Yeah, so in that spirit, I thought maybe we could start by describing ourselves, and I can go first. I'm on screen. I'm a white woman with like chin length, blondish, brownish hair. I have gold glasses on. And a black sweater, and my lighting is low. I have mostly purple light. I'm trying to be visible, but I don't want to get a migraine, so being careful with my lighting. And I'll just also say that Joan is on screen doing our ASL interpretation. Joan has on a gray shirt and is in front of a bunch of books. Yeah, Jordan, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much, Emily. That's such a sweet introduction, and I'm just really excited to be able to like talk about this film with you, because I feel like you're someone who really understands a lot of what I'm trying to do with it, and also, it means a lot to me that someone who has a similar experience, has watched it and related to it. So yeah, I'm really glad to start with visual description. I'm a white person, 30 years old. I have currently bleached blonde hair. It is dyed blonde. That is like pretty short, I would say. And I currently have a mustache, and I'm wearing a turtleneck and a flecked sweater in a room. There's a tea kettle behind me, some jackets, an umbrella hanging on a hook. I really like that Zoom, at least one thing about visual description is you can actually see yourself as you're describing yourself, which is something that I guess is happening in the film, but isn't something that always happens when you're giving a visual description. So I know a lot more of what I look like than usual. Mom and Dad, do you want to go next?
For me, I'm a 59-year-old white male who was hair follically challenged. Used to have some there, so Jordan, enjoy what you have while you have it. Stay there. But going with the film, you mentioned that I was not happy the way I was portrayed at times. I'm a very proud man, and I don't like to show my weaknesses. And I felt that the film showed that, but the things we went through really did weaken us. Debt can absolutely be a handicap for someone that affects you all the way to your soul, especially when you did what I did in banking. Then to have to make a choice to file bankruptcy myself, we voluntarily told our trustee in the court that our income actually increased during the bankruptcy because of Agent Orange disability I had from Vietnam. Bankruptcy court took most of that, and our attorney said, well, why are you telling us this? And because we wanted to do the right thing. So if you get nothing else out of that, don't look at the weakness, look at the fact we're two people that wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Deborah, do you want to describe yourself or should I do it? Up to you.
I'll try. I am a white female. I am 65 years old. If you could see, I've got a lot of gray in here because I haven't done my hair color lately. But we're sitting in Jordan's bedroom here in Gulfport. And so there are lots of pictures on the wall that he has chosen. And I have on a animal print top. And I have blue eyes. And I feel like I'm a movie star with my son because he has us in a film. But anyway, that's me.
Thank you both so much. I mean, one thing I love about the film is also that some parts of the narrative are sort of mixed in with the visual description. So whether it's you guys telling different parts of the story, or Jordan giving information that maybe is can't be seen and is not visual information. And I also appreciate that it's not super didactic. It's not like I am doing a film that's accessible with visual descriptions. It's just sort of folded in as though it's normal, and incorporated in the voiceover. And in the same way, you have open captions, so captions that cannot be turned off as is common, but rather captions are just part of the film. And in some cases, they like block something that's behind it, and that's very much part of what you're doing. And in the same sense, you're sort of chafing at the idea that, we often equate seeing with knowing, which you also do in your film, after access. So I think it's Albert talking at one point where you say, it might not look like we're bankrupt. We have all these nice things, but there's more than just what you see. There's scenes where Jordan is covering the lens with their finger. So I guess I wanted to ask Jordan about if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more about incorporating access into your film sort of from the beginning rather than just tacking it on at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, for me, Well, it actually kind of started as a kind of before I made After Access, I was already working on this film, and it was around that time that Dad, you started to have you were actually diagnosed with the diabetic retinopathy, and we knew that there could be a more serious deterioration of your vision. And so I began thinking about it as this sort of fundamental problem that maybe like speaks to a larger issue about documentary in general, which is like this question of like, what does it mean to make this film if like the main person who like is in it like won't even be able to see it. But like thinking about that as like a question of access in like numerous senses, of course, around like physical access, but also like who a film thinks of its audience as being, and also how that person experiences it matters a lot. And so I guess maybe this is clear from anybody who's just experienced the film, but for me it became a very clear way to deal with the fact that there were multiple films going on at any given time. It wasn't just the film that I thought that I had made and how I see it. Of course, it's also the way in which, Mom is seeing it, the way in which Dad is seeing it, the way in which Ashley's seeing it. And we could just, tessellate that out further onto everybody who is in it. And so that, I think, became this sort of driving impulse behind how I wanted to deal with access in the film. And so in that regard, the access does sort of try to just like blur into the way that all of these different frames are being framed at any given moment. And I think that that's the thing, right, about like how access is thought usually is it's seen as like exceptional rather than as like the very thing that constitutes the frame to begin with. And so this idea that a film is composed of like different people perceiving it, I wanted to underline that in terms of how the people who were involved with it, were perceiving that as the ground state that's like making the frame.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'm gonna ask about the contract scene, and then our Google Doc is getting flooded, which I love. And if anyone else, wants to add questions there, please feel free. Yeah, so we all just saw the contract scene, and you read some of it, but I believe not all of it. And there's like a suggestion that maybe you're going to change the contract. And you talk about how filmmakers are taught to secure their investment, and again how this like language of debt sort of leaks into many aspects of our lives. So yeah, I guess I was wondering if you guys could talk about the film has been edited and is being screened, and where things went from there.
Well, I'll let y'all talk about it too, but as far as I kind of understood it, the contract was kaput at the moment you're also watching it in the film. I mean, I still have the contract as this kind of evolving document that I'm interested in applying for other projects. But Dad, do you want to talk about your feelings about the contract? And also Mom, I mean, you make your feelings very known just through facial expressions, I feel, in that scene, but I want to hear your thoughts about it too, because we do hear Dad's, but we don't really hear that many of yours, Mom, as well.
Well,
No, go ahead, because you have a definite opinion.
no, just the fact that, that's my son. I trust my son. I don't know why I would need to sign a contract with my son. I think the need for a contract's more from the filmmaker's standpoint than from the subject. So I believe the filmmaker has to protect themselves, but I'm very opinionated about the contract. I can't imagine me not just with film ever having signed a contract with my son. And would not sign a contract with my son. Just so you know, Jordan.
We wouldn't feel the necessity because we know he would protect us at all. For anything, he would protect us. So I would think that it wouldn't be necessary either. But my eyes rolling and whatever and getting big is because my husband does have definite opinions about things, and he's not afraid of expressing them. Whereas a Southern woman, I temper what I'm going to say. He just gets out there.
But as a filmmaker, you know, I think it's important that Jordan showed me that he's trying to protect or portray images that I would like, not to put me in a light I don't want to see. There builds trust. I think a filmmaker can build trust with their subject or destroy that trust. And that's critical, I think, for the filmmaker, not for the subject.
Yeah. Well,
if you want the subject to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, I'm glad that y'all think that, you know, y'all feel that you can trust me. And in a lot of ways, I feel like the contract stemmed out of this feeling that I have betrayed your trust. I mean, because you were very upset. And that's something that we see in the film. And I think in a lot of, I mean, I do think you were rightfully upset as well, because you actually didn't know certain things that were being filmed at the time. And so to see them without knowing that those things are being filmed, you know, that makes perfect sense to me, that would be upsetting. I guess the thing that I wanted to talk more about with y'all, you know, that we have talked more about since we had the scene with the contract, is that really the contract is meant to be about this kind of declaration of debt. At the moment that, you know, the ordinary contract is about trying to, you know, secure the investments so that no debt can be, you know, declared between the filmmaker and the person who appears in the film. You know, it usually says something to the effect of, you know, I reserve the right to do whatever I want with it, essentially meaning you don't owe them anything anymore at that point. And that was really the main thing that I wanted to underline there, is just that I do feel, I mean, to me, it's a quite absurd practice, you know, that is essentially having to tell a lie in order to, you know, make it possible for the, you know, for the film to be exchanged and shared beyond the filmmaker and the people in it. But for me, that was something that I still feel unwilling to do, you know. And if there ever was the opportunity to sell the film, you know, that would be something that would be a condition for me, would be that, you know, there isn't this contract that says that I don't owe y'all anything. But I know that that's something that, you know, we've disagreed on, you know, what I owe you and in what way. So.
You totally.
Are you want to make a comment on that?
You can. I mean, you could. You don't have to. I mean,
I'm just saying, you don't owe us anything.
Yeah.
It was our. Here we go again. It's our responsibility to give you the tools to build a life. We can't build a life for you. You got to build a life. I think you're doing a great job building your life. That you owe us nothing. You're my son.
And my comment would be, you owe us because we want
Mom, we
you to
can't
be
hear
successful.
you.
That's what you owe us, is to make a success of yourself and be successful and happy in what you're choosing. So I say that's what you owe us. You owe us to be successful and to love what you're doing and to be good at it. And that's what you're doing.
And I have to disagree with that, because you don't have to be successful for us. Success is measured very differently with different people. And you're happy, you're independent. That's all I care about.
I think I'm happy and dependent.
But there is no debt. I would not sign a contract with you. So I didn't sign a contract with you. So not then with the film, but with anything in life, that's not going to happen. You're my son.
And I want to be clear, I obviously agree that it doesn't make any sense to have a contract with your family. Like, that was the whole point to me, was like, it was a contract to prevent this contract that wanted to do something that would tear our family apart, actually, or tear apart the bond between a filmmaker and the person that they're working with. And so what I was really just trying to say is that this contract is standard and treated as if it isn't. It's not even something that you can say anything about, because it's so normal that, you know, this is just the way that you do things. But to me, it's exactly the opposite of what I believe. And so it was intentionally a contract that was supposed to prevent us having a contract. So us not having a contract is fine by me. I mean, it's kind of re-accomplishing the original goal, but it sounds counterintuitive, I know.
Just so you know, it's 2020, then 2020, there is no normal.
Right. That's true.
I was just going to say, yeah, the contract sounds like more of a critique of the standard documentary film contract than a comment on your relationship with your parents. I'm going to dive into the Google Doc.
Cool. I haven't seen
that. And I'm just letting people know I'm making the font huge for my own access purposes. And I forgot to say this earlier, but if there are access requests that you have throughout the event that you want to, I guess, put into the Google Doc, they can be anonymous or whatever. Just please let us know and we'll do our best to accommodate you. So this is a comment from someone named Nika or Nika. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Congrats, Jordan. So great to see you in your film. I would love to hear about how you're continuing to make work based on ongoing consent and what I would describe as a consciously anti-extraction style of documentary filmmaking. I really like those descriptors, ongoing consent and anti-extraction. Also, Nika loves Deborah's visual description.
Hi, Nika. It's good to be here with you. Nika is like my best roommate that I've ever had, and is a dear friend that I haven't gotten to see in a while. So I'm so glad that you're here with us. So about ongoing consent. So yeah, like that, I mean, that's a huge part of what the contract is trying to underline, right? Is that like usually the contract is this one-time consent that then binds you to whatever decision you made at some point in time. And this is so much of how I've at least observed consent gets kind of weaponized against people to do exactly the opposite of what it's supposedly supposed to do, which is to, say, was the person okay with it? Like, it's a pretty simple question, but our answer, has become like very like impossible because of the structures in place around liability and the law in general. The contract is sort of, the contract, but also consent, like oscillate around where it's like, if you said yes at some point, it's always yes. If you said no at some point, it's always no. And of course, that's something that is continuously used to actually prevent the redress of harm rather than prevent harm. And so, like for me, the main way that I've been doing that is just kind of by trying to write about it and by doing I do want the contract to be out there as a document that other filmmakers could potentially use, or at least like use as food for thought in terms of adapting their own contracts. I mean, of course, the other side of this is like a lot of ways that I've thought about this is like how similar it is to like medical releases that you're forced to sign. And this notion of informed consent that documentary filmmaking like kind of derives its idea of the release from is actually, of course, a medical discourse. And, this is something that I really didn't think about in a very clear way until I spoke with Carolyn Lazard about it, who's an incredible artist who's made work around similar subject matters, and particularly about this series of medical experiments that were done on content warning, the horrific, racist prison industrial complex. But, there were a series of medical experiments and biological experiments done on a population of prisoners all throughout, a good chunk of the 20th century in Philadelphia. And, part of it is that, they supposedly signed something saying that, they were informed of the risk, and that then that's supposed to be okay. Like after you're informed of the risk, then suddenly, the conditions under which that consent were given no longer matter. And so, it's why in so many ways, like legally rendered consent feels very like next to impossible, if not entirely impossible, because of the ways that it it depends on holding people to a moment of decision rather than giving people the option of changing their minds, and looking at the reasons why someone might be changing their mind at a given point in time. So, and of course that makes sense to a certain degree why that gets deployed so much in medicine, because it is things that have like irreparable or completely ongoing effects after the decision is made to consent to a medical procedure or something to this effect. But of course, that doesn't change the fact that that active decision is an ongoing thing itself, right? Like living with whatever the effects of that decision are, is what the consent revolves around. And as Constantina Devesanos said when we actually had our last conversation around the film, the other side of consent that we, that gets occluded by the legal concept of consent is, at its core, consent is feeling with another person. And, the point of it is, of course, simultaneously that it's impossible, but that it's also the only thing, that like our relationships are built on in some way. And so it's, I think, about like trying to anticipate the ways that the law uses consent so that we actually don't feel with each other, so that we're kind of segmented into you're over here and I'm over there, rather than if we're actually going to consent, we really need to like think about how this is affecting both of us and how nothing can ever be decided once and for all. It's always ongoing. So sorry, that was a long rambling answer, but I hope that it's somewhat related to what you're asking about, Nika.
I mean, I think so. And also kind of one thing you were getting at that I think is an important theme is, just how kind of legal language can kind of work the same way, like in film, in debt, in medicine. And there are kind of these like rigid ways of thinking about things in terms of risk and liability and things like this, where maybe where maybe it shouldn't apply or it should be thought of differently and things like this.
Yeah, and just one quick thing on that is like the common denominator on that always is this kind of like deferral of responsibility, right? Like at the moment that the thing is actually shared, there's this idea that it can be made individual, and then they use that as a way of securing whatever interest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's an anonymous question, which says, "Bravo" in periwinkle, and then in black. "This was so heartwarming, Jordan. I teared up. I now can go into the weekend ready to give some love to the world and the people in my life." Really sweet. "Thank you for sharing and reminding me what it is to be a good listener and observer, attentive to the needs and wants of your subjects. I was curious, could you talk about modes of listening and observation you think about as a documentary filmmaker? Or if you and yours have any methods for being an attentive listener in daily life?" And I agree that this comes through really strongly in the film, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I love this question. Thank you so much for asking it. I really want to hear about it from mom and dad too, about how they're attentive listeners in their daily life. But I can say that like some was made was actually like me being unable really in the moment to feel that I could observe or listen to what was going on, because in many moments I felt really overwhelmed, or even just the act of being a filmmaker, like in a very personal situation, was a kind of like distancing or coping mechanism to some extent. And so much of the like listening and observation that took place was actually the kind that happens when like you just set a camera to record, and then you're actually figuring out afterward, like what has actually even been recorded. And so a lot of it has been, taking these things that are, this of course mix of things that, I have are so second nature to me, literally home, but then seeing them through this other lens of, of now they've been recorded in this way. And I don't know, it reminds me as well of this film that, I mean, really all three of us made it together, but the part that you're seeing is the footage that my mom recorded called "I Can Hear My Mother's Voice." And yeah, so much of that film to me is also this kind of attentive listening that you're realizing like other people are also hearing different things in it than what you're hearing in it. And I think that was the primary thing that I became really struck by afterward. It was how, like, what it is to listen by like listening to other people listening. So yeah, what about y'all?
You want me to go first? It was interesting doing the movie with Jordan because things came out I didn't realize while we're doing the movie. I'm the kind of person that if it's negative, I bury it. Don't want to think about it. Don't want to talk about it. And Jordan let me see things about myself I didn't see. You know, that fact, I have more weaknesses than I wanted to admit to myself that I had. I didn't realize the effect of what was going on in our life truly was having on our life. It literally changed me. And talking to Jordan brought that out and brought myself back to where I wanted to be. So cathartic may not be the right word, but it was very healing, if nothing else. And I didn't realize we said, I want to make this film that I thought it would be healing, but it was.
The thing that applied to me the most was that when Albert was watching himself and he was explaining to Jordan, or he was so upset with Jordan because of what Jordan had recorded. And I was seeing one thing and I couldn't make him see what I was seeing. And it was, you know, I mean, we went through that whole thing, you know, where I was trying to explain, you don't understand, this is exactly how you were acting. This is real. This was you. This was you in the moment, you know, and it took him probably seeing the film, I don't know, maybe three times before he ever realized it really was him. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't, that's the way he really was acting.
I was watching.
And
Sorry, Mom, you're breaking up. Oh.
I know it keeps telling Dad and I that we have a bad internet connection. Remember, we just had the storm, so we're still working out internet. But are you hearing me better? Or okay. But anyway, I mean, to me, that was listening. You have to listen, you know. And he wasn't listening. He didn't want to watch it. He didn't want to listen. He didn't want to hear any of the negative things he was going through, which is when Jordan came up with the brilliant idea of covering the lens with his finger so that his dad wasn't portrayed in a more negative light, because his dad interpreted that as being negative because it was a weakness. And so I think that listening is so imperative. You know, we've got to hear on all levels. We've got to see it and hear it so that we can understand who we are. And I think that was really hard for you, is seeing who you are in that moment.
In my mind, somebody else's movie, not me. And it took me a while to finally realize, yeah, that was me.
It was him.
I mean, that's really, I don't know, it's very powerful to hear you say that, Dad, because like I feel like you know, we've talked about it, but I didn't know that, you know, you really saw it that way. So it means a lot to me that you did see it that way. And I have to be honest, like it also goes the other way too. Like, I mean, I obviously had my narrative of what the film was and would be and what it was for. And it really took hearing you, Dad, as well, like listening to the fact that it hurt you and that you were upset by how you were portrayed. And so, you know, I think, you know, you're right, Mom. Like, I mean, I think the listening, you know, it has to be on all sides. And I tried to listen. I don't know the extent to which I succeeded, but even if I didn't succeed at listening, I hope that it like provides enough voices for other people to also then listen and kind of hear what they're going to hear from it. I mean, we're prioritizing hearing and listening and these things that maybe not everybody's doing, but so then reading or, you know, hearing what's being actually shown or seeing what's being heard. You know, it's also happening hopefully across those access points as well.
Totally, and also just, yeah, being open to other perspectives. Yeah, that comes across really clearly for me, at least. There's another question from someone named Amy. It says, thank you so much for this. I'm wondering about something that Jordan says in voiceover about how a documentary is similar to life insurance and that it cuts or frames a life before it's over. I'm paraphrasing. But what I felt from watching this film was how much it points to life outside of what we see, how complex the stories are, etc. Like kind of the opposite of insurance to me, ? Jordan, can you please talk more about what you say in that part of the film?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I was just kind of like going along it's a similar thing. I think a lot of this film clearly like comes out of like me being in like film school to a certain degree. Like I was looking at a lot of documentary and also like listening to like what you should do like in documentary, like what's a good way to make a documentary, and like, you know, it makes sense. You're trying to give people strategies for how to do something that it's not necessarily clear like a roadmap for. And so I think what I was talking about specifically there was how, you know, I was really shocked when I found out that like you're supposed to come up with the story structure for the documentary before it's finished being shot. I was just like, how? Like, how do you do that if a documentary is about life as it unfolds? Then what does that mean? That you're going to already decide before the thing has happened, like what's going to happen, which is something that you are legitimately encouraged to do, and that is because of funding structures. Like, I mean, I got no funding to make this film. I applied for grants, but I didn't get any, and it's probably because I'm not good enough at doing this kind of thing. But, you know, what you're supposed to do in order to get funding, and it makes sense to a certain extent, but then as a storyteller or as just a person who's trying to listen and observe life, you're just kind of confused when you're told that you should come up with an entire arc, you know, of how the story unfolds, even when you're just proposing it, like before you've ever shot a thing. You know, this is how you're taught to do it. And so I think that's what I was speaking about specifically. But of course, you know, film troubles that altogether. You know, I mean, it's, of course, so much of what film is what doesn't go in the frame. So much of what film is how it is, and especially documentary film is like, is the thing that you couldn't predict was going to happen. And that is so much more complicated than what the filmmaker writes in a grant application is, you know, this is what the film is about and this is what it's going to be. I think about how many times I've like rehearsed what that film is, and has actually no resemblance whatsoever to the film, I hope. So I think that's a great question. But that's what I was talking about, is this kind of like template that it seems really impossible to me.
Yeah, that seems pretty fundamental and not conducive to, yeah, allowing other perspectives in the process or your mind to be changed, or yeah. And then after access, you talk about how you're taught also in film school to show and not tell. And I think this film and that one both like complicate the ableism and other. I'm going to read another question, and I'm changing people's colors, not because of their questions, not because they're not beautiful, but just to make them a little more legible. So this one says, I don't think it's signed. It says, "Hi all. Thank you so much, Jordan, for this incredibly moving work. I'm hoping to ask you more about how you approached the debt that the filmmaker owes to the subject." So this is a question both for you and your parents. The relationship / entanglement between filmmaker and subject is incredibly complicated, as you show beautifully. I want to ask you more about the process of debt and responsibility in documentary filmmaking. So this is a question for Jordan. Do you believe you can ever reconcile the power relationship between maker and subject? And then for Deborah and Albert, the question is, did Jordan approaching the film this way, by checking in with you along the way, did this make the process of making the film more difficult, or was it easier and more understandable for you?
I feel like I don't want to like defer the question, but like I mean, basically my short answer is like no, like I don't think that I like succeeded in like getting rid of the power dynamic between me and my parents in terms of like who ultimately controls like how people are going to see it. I mean, I think in order to do that, it would have to be beyond just you know what the format was or what the conversation was that we had. I mean, I feel like y'all, mom and dad, I feel like you would also have to be like actively editing, maybe even actively having the, you know, the tools of like filming and have your own footage and film me without me knowing about it. And, you know, all of these things, like, you know, there's a clear imbalance there. And that's something that I think is really, you know, or even just like the ways in which like these processes of writing about it, deciding what it's about, like these are things I tried to go away from there, but they're still in the film somewhere. You know, and actually like reading something that someone wrote about the film, I was like, wow, there's so much more of this in here than I actually even knew. So that's my answer is I don't think that it can be fully reconciled, but I guess the question is more like for me, like being able to point to what are those things that make that dynamic irreconcilable, and then like not taking those things as a given, and so like continuing to push up against them and actually like think through like are there things that you can do to try to at least like complicate or trouble that dynamic. And so this was what I was able to do in this film, was like make choices to not show certain things at certain points and to like let this kind of like denial of access be a kind of access. And then you know, and then of course, as we talked about, like just include your disagreement with the process in the film, and also your own perspectives on it. But I want to hear more from you, mom and dad, about if you know what they asked, if we thought this process about us me trying to approach the film made it more difficult, easier, or more understandable.
I'll go first. I think that it was difficult at times because it was very emotional. It was a very emotional time for me, especially because Albert is a very dynamic person in our relationship, and he has definite opinions, and he is a man that I look to for help in especially finances. And so when I thought that he was, you know, I didn't know what the outcome was going to be if he didn't be so sick. And I didn't know how it was going to affect us. And Jordan was very cognizant of my feelings. And I felt that there were times when he would call and ask for, you know, some input because I was watching the film and giving, you know, telling him things that I thought. And it was just a very emotional time. Seeing the film for the first time, I mean, I just went to pieces because, you know, looking at myself, seeing what I had gone through, reliving it, and him not understanding what I'd been through because he didn't see himself. And it was very, very difficult because he didn't see himself. And so I was constantly having to wrestle with those emotions, and Jordan calling and going, okay, can we record, can we look at it again? Can we look at it again? And I don't know how many times we recorded, Jordan. I don't know, but I saw it a lot, and you know, more than his dad did. And it was just a very emotional time because I was having to relive it constantly. And Jordan, though, was very, you know, when I would say, you know, this is just too much, Jordan was, you know, he was good about just pushing it off and saying, okay, we'll just do it another time. You know, we'll go over this another time. And he did the same thing with his dad. You know, when, you know, his initial reaction was, I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch it. Jordan didn't push. You know, he didn't say, well, you got to do it, Dad, because this is part of what I'm doing. Jordan didn't do that.
Well, I really like the question, because had you asked me at the beginning of this process, I'd said harder. But now that I'm looking back, the way Jordan handled his interviews and having multiple interviews made it much, much easier. because as time went on, I think I became more open than I was when he first said I want to do this project. I was actually against the project at first. But Jordan got things out of me that I'm still surprised looking at, that I was that open. But Deborah said it best. He didn't push, but having multiple interviews, I think every time we talked, more came out, and it was easier to share those things. So had we asked this question 5 years ago, I'd say this is very hard. Now I'd say the way he handled it made it much easier. And even though he's my son, you still got to gain trust, and he gained my trust through the process.
That's great. Thank you. We have about 10 more minutes, and this question from Ekram is a fun one, which I like also because as, heavy and I'm sure difficult, and, there are some like pretty intense themes and sad times. There's also a lot of humor in the film that was really especially apparent to me this time around. So, but Ekram is asking all three of you, Jordan, Albert, and Deborah, if growing up you watched or made home movies, and a question for Jordan about if the home movie model, like as a mode of production, resonates with you.
Why don't y'all go first?
Huh?
Why don't y'all go first?
Oh, let me go first. Right, I love this question. Did you ask this, Emily, or somebody else?
Ekram.
Ekram. Oh, every Christmas, I made a Christmas movie. I made something funny. I picked somebody that'd be at the house and make fun of them. It was a funny movie, entertaining. I loved making my Christmas movie. So I would like to think Jordan is my muse.
We all enjoyed them. And we all got to participate in some role.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we were multiple characters. I was the person that held the script. We all had a job to do. So it was a fun time for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that that like this filmmaking process was actually like a part of my life from like a very, very young age. And I remember just like so desperately wanting to be a part of it, when I was a kid. And what's funny about it is it wasn't documentary, in that sense. It was like this kind of, let's all get together and like tell a story that's like retelling a story that we all know about this person, but in a caricatured form, and making those movies together. We did have, home video footage being recorded, and, you don't have a camcorder, and we
just can't look at any of it.
But we never look at it. Yeah, because Katrina happened, and, it's on A8 tape, which is a difficult format to access. Now, although we have like a little machine that we were going to use to try to convert it. I loved actually watching some of that footage, right? When I first started making the film, I started watching some of that footage. But I would say that part, of the like collaborating all together as a family, that was much closer to, I think, something that I learned from than even this kind of impulse to document. That's the weird thing about me working in documentary, is I actually just don't like most documentary films. Like, and I'm not trying to be shitty. It's just like, it's just not the thing that I like prefer to watch. We watched so many movies, when I was a child, together when I get together with, mom and dad. So I had always intended to be like a fictional filmmaker. And when we first started trying to make this, I really did want that kind of spirit of like thinking of scenes together to be what was motivating the process. It's just that it was a lot harder than I thought. And also I think like what I've learned is just, it's not like directing a movie in that way is just not, it's not something that I feel good at. And that's also just not something I enjoy. Because part of it is, I think I really, and so in this part, like in a more traditional home movie sense, like that is so much more of like how I really approach filmmaking, is I like to just let the camera roll for a really long time and then like figure out, like, actually, like, you know, be surprised by, like, you know, the movie unfolding before me, and the movie comes together from that usually. So I tried to get some mix of both toward the end, but yeah.
I'm so glad Ekram asked that question because I had no idea about this backstory. And yeah, I mean, it's in many ways like a Christmas movie. So that's really exciting.
The difference between Jordan and I, you should know that when I'd make a movie, I'd wrap the tape in toilet paper and give it as a gag gift to whoever was the subject that we were picking on that year. But as far as I know, Jordan's never done that.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
In toilet paper, Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one question. I'm sorry, I'm just reading it because it's like we've sort of covered it, but not exactly. So I was just trying to think think through that. Yeah, I guess it's just a question revisiting that idea of yeah, what it's like to look back 5 years, you know, over the course of 5 years, to look back at yourself and your own story, and you know, are you feeling differently now? It sounds like yes, at least certainly for Albert. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts to add that we didn't already cover about what it's like to look at this thing that's been filmed about you guys for 5 years and your feelings changing over time.
Jordan, mind if I tell them our really big news?
No, I was hoping you would. I think that's great.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure. What was it, Tuesday? Tuesday of this week, we went to the bank, bought our last cashier's check with our very last payment in our bankruptcy, took it to the trustee's office, took video on the outside. We have just paid our last payment to the trustee. We are celebrating. We don't drink, but I could celebrate with Pepsi. I can get silly with Pepsi, but it's like, I can't tell you the load is off our shoulders. And as I made a promise to myself, the trustee's office told us actually less than 5% people actually completed Chapter 13 plan over all 5 years. We did that. As I said earlier, we actually increased our payments voluntarily. And I told Jordan, Deborah and I have already talked about the money we've been paying the trustee. All our creditors, secured creditors paid 100%, unsecured creditors been paid 60%. And beginning the 1st of next month, we will continue to make the money that we paid the trustee, we will continue to voluntarily pay until everybody that had trust in us gets repaid. So we're celebrating here. It's just like this giant load off our shoulders.
Congratulations.
Mom, do you want to say anything, or do we have?
It's just very emotional. We were rejoicing. It's been a long road. So rejoice is the best word I can come up with, because there's been a lot of prayer and tears and lots of tears,
including my tears.
Yeah, lots of tears, lots of emotion went into it. So it was an exciting day when we were able to pay that last note. So lots of rejoicing. Yes,
I like
sir.
it, Ekram. I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
Going yay in the Google Doc off camera. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Emily.
Yeah, it's
I like
okay.
it. I like it.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Rochelle. This is such an amazing, lovely, generous conversation, and such a, really lovely evening. I couldn't have wished for such a better evening for this, for this week and for many weeks since, in general. So yeah, thank you all, and thank you all for watching and viewing, and yeah, hope you all have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to
I
meet
just
you
also
all.
want to say thank
Yes,
Good
you.
night,
indeed.
congratulations.
Love you, baby.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Joan.
y'all so much. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you,
Yes,
everyone.
indeed. It's nice to meet all of y'all.
And
Yeah, you
more.
too.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you, Emily.
Therapist, just so you
Happy
know.
birthday, Jordan.
Bye.